I was the wayward one. I was the one that did have an affair. I hated myself. I was falling head over heels in love with someone at the same time as hurting someone who's one of the most important people in my life and the mother of my children and a lovely human being who deserved to be happy and didn't deserve to be hurt.
How did you get from the separation, the turmoil of the early days to where you are now?
I can't understand is why someone would prefer that the step parent of their children would be someone that they don't get along with, because that is not a nice environment for your children. So why would you not want them to like the step parent? I want my children to be surrounded by people that love them.
Welcome to Life, Love and the Law, the Stowe Family Law podcast. My name is Lisa Gatchell and I am joined today by Tom Nash, aka Mr. Divorce Coach, and his partner Donna. So welcome back to the podcast, Tom, and also welcome for the first time, Donna. Can you start by introducing yourselves to the listeners?
Yeah. My name's Tom Nash, otherwise known as Mr. Divorce Coach. I'm an internationally accredited specialist divorce coach with a passion for co-parenting and blended families. And this is my partner, Donna.
Hi.
Hi, Donna. You don't have to look so scared. Obviously, we've had you on before and you've talked a little bit about your co-parenting situation and how that's worked and how positive that has ended up being, even though you obviously had some quite challenging times with that at different points as well. Do you want to, from your perspective, let us know why you are here to discuss this subject today?
We wanted to do this episode with you guys because actually we've both had experiences of affairs and divorce and relationship breakup and how that all then kind of pans out many years down the line from both sides, from kind of the wayward and the betrayed side of things. And then just share a bit of our story, a bit of our experience, our wider blended family. And we've lived it, we've breathed it, been through it ourselves and our own relationships on different sides of events, as well as kind of background of our families growing up and things like that. So we've just got quite a bit of kind of personal experience. Plus I spend quite a lot of my time working with individuals and couples with going through this life-changing experience as well. So we'll come and share some nuggets of wisdom and insight.
Should we go back to the beginning then? So like probably before the, further back than we have done previously. What happened in your previous relationships that started to lead to where you are now?
Going right the way back then, I suppose, like giving a bit more insight over kind of both sides of that. And this is where your audience are probably going to switch off from liking me. I hope not. But I was the wayward one. I was the one that did have an affair. Donna and her then husband actually had already separated. So they were actually already co-parenting for and separated and living separately for some time beforehand.
Yeah, we separated in the June of, I think it was 2016. So because I originally had different shifts where I would start later and finish later, after me and my ex-husband separated, my shifts changed so that I could accommodate being around for my children, because I, from the start, had 50-50 with my ex. It was something that I felt really passionate about because I'd come from a broken home when I was young and spent majority of the time with my dad and didn't really see my mum that much for a few years. So we had quite a fractured relationship when I was younger. And I was left to make decisions when I was a child that I probably shouldn't have made. Well, when I say a child, I was a teenager and I felt like I didn't want to see my mum, and my dad respected that because he thought that that was a decision that I was old enough to make. In hindsight, I wasn't old enough to make that decision. I was basically taking on the feelings of what my dad had felt from them separating. And because of that, I always insisted that it wasn't a decision that I ever wanted my children to make. It was something that they could make as adults, but, they had a good dad. We chose together to have our children, and I wanted him to be an equal part of their lives. So we had 50-50. So that's where the shift changed. So I basically ended up working longer days on the days that I didn't have the children and shorter days on the days that I didn't. So I would get the train, and that's where I'd met Tom. Sorry, that's a really long way of saying that. So
no, you had a great meet cute on the train.
Yeah.
We did, yeah. And then met through some mutual friends who had a WhatsApp commuter group, didn't they? And then we hadn't actually met at that point.
No.
And then I think you kind of started seeing my name pop up in the feed, hadn't you? You'd even said to one of our friends, Mark, like, who is this Tom guy? Doesn't shut up.
It
or
was really
something.
irritating because your phone would buzz all day long, and I had to learn how to mute my WhatsApp because I didn't have to do it before then. So
Yeah. So we'd met on the train, hadn't we? And then in a kind of romantic way, it was actually getting off at this stop just around the corner from where we are today recording, because we were only about like one stop apart, weren't we, from our offices? So we just basically both used to get off at Farringdon and walk to our respective offices. So we just started walking together. So at first we were friends, really, weren't we? And you were talking about what you were going through, having already separated. I was talking about me being unhappy in my then marriage, things like that. And then that's kind of how it all started, really.
How did it, if you don't mind speaking about it, how did it come out? How did that then cause the end of your relationship, if you like?
So we would spend quite a lot of time together, like walking in the mornings, walking in the evenings. We'd end up meeting at lunch. And there was, again, you always say that I romanticize things, but we used to basically say we were like magnets. Even when we would purposely try to, because we did say that we tried, maybe we didn't try hard enough, but at one point we did try to say, look, there's clearly something between us. We need to stay away from each other. So even when we tried to avoid each other and we'd purposely walk different routes, we'd still end up kind of back towards one another. And then it was March 2017, when I then told my then wife that I wasn't happy in our marriage, in our relationship, wanted to separate, and didn't immediately tell her the truth. It was one kind of cowardly regret of mine that I'd never kind of put her out of her misery straight away, but very quickly did, not long after. Yeah, and then we split up. John and I got together, and then fast forward 9 years and we're sitting here talking to you.
You spoke a little bit about I didn't immediately tell her, and that's something I regret. Are there ways in which conversations happened at that time that, with the benefit of hindsight, and we can all have hindsight, but if you were giving somebody advice that was in a similar situation, are there things that you would have done differently, or would you have liked to have done differently, and how would that be?
Yeah, but it's not really about living with regret or I wish I'd done it a different way, because I think that everything happens for what we always say, isn't it? Like, everything happens for a reason, and you work through those things. I think the only thing about telling her, when I told her that I wish I had told her sooner, was actually more respectful perspective, so that she didn't think she was going mad as well, that maybe everything wasn't all in her head or second guessing things, and also that it then hopefully wouldn't have had so much of an impact on her and her confidence, her self-esteem, that she thought it was all her fault or anything like that. I think those are the other things that I really probably would have rather dealt with differently and better, with more honest and frank conversations and owning my stuff more. But I think that was also part of my growth, my learning, and doing why I do what I do now to help other people. Just swapping hats from me to the professional side for a minute, but that is a lot of the work that I do with people and working with individuals. Is about not necessarily what do you want to say, but also how do you want to say it, when do you want to say it, like what are you sharing with them, thinking about from their perspective, what are they going to need and need to hear, even if it's really hard. And it's not about being brutally honest, because you can still do it with some compassion and humility, but it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, but also not making rash decisions as well. Timing wise, I like using analogies. I use it with clients all the time, like train tracks. There's one person that's several stops down the track, sort of thing. So you need to slow your train down a little bit, allow them to catch up a little bit more, but not making those emotively charged reactive decisions. And I was building up to telling my then wife for a while. And when I think about it, in my own head, I was having this moment of, if you don't say something now, will you ever? And how worse will it be? And how much more will you hurt her? And it kind of just blurted out. I planned it on my head, but I hadn't planned it out with somebody else who could challenge my thinking with it. And that's what I also see again with clients as well. They say, oh, my friend, my brother, my sister, my whatever has said. It's about helping people understand having the right positive support network around you to help you think differently.
Do you think it's impacted how your divorce and separation was dealt with from your first wife?
Well, again, this is all out in the media, isn't it? That most people know if they don't, because you can go read about it. But obviously, our respective exes became a couple only a matter of weeks, barely even months later, wasn't it?
I think it was a few months.
8-9 years down the line, they're still together. But even then, that still had, in those earlier days, we still had both very different kind of legal, financial, formal and emotional divorces, separations. Like Don was saying, her and her ex immediately went to a shared care and plotted out what is now the 2255 arrangement that we have across the board, sort of thing. You guys organised things in a lot more of an amicable way, or more of a dignified way, I would say. It was less contentious, and the decisions that you guys seem to have made were less emotively charged or derived than I think mine and my exes were. Like, she was, understandably so, she was really, really hurt, and it was all coming from the emotional place and the support mechanism she had around her, which wasn't helping things. But yeah, my separation, divorce process, financial, legal, child matters, that was much, much more difficult than Donna's was. But yet then the two worlds obviously collide.
Yeah.
You've got one that's going in a very different way, and then one that's really, really contentious and really, really difficult, but still impacting the other one.
Do you think that with the way that yours was being dealt with was sometimes because where there has been infidelity, one person has checked out earlier? So for the partner that has committed the adultery or the infidelity, to a certain extent, they have been able to process and come to terms with the end of their relationship before it's said to the other person. Whereas for the other person, they get that and then they're trying to process further down the line.
Yeah.
And so you're almost at two different places. Whereas if you're in a relationship that's breaking down, but you've kind of made that mutual decision that the relationship, then you both start off at an equal place in where you are emotionally.
It wasn't mutual. So although we knew it had been breaking down for some time, we were in two very different places. I think that he thought that we would get through it, and I'd got to a point where it had been a long time and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. So it was hard. And although, like Tom says, it was amicable, there was some difficulties. I think that because Tom came on the scene a little while later, there was an assumption that I had had an affair with Tom, like whilst I was with him, which hadn't been the case. But because he was hurt, it felt like that was what was happened, and that was in his mind the explanation.
It's an easy thing to blame.
It was an easy thing to blame, instead of actually looking at the root cause of, like, we both were unhappy. We both admit that now. And, he's a good friend of mine. So like we've talked about all of this previously. So when we would have a conversation, just the two of us, we would make decisions. We would be completely grown up about it. He would understand my positions on things. I would understand his, and we would be on the same page. I think that because he had the support network, which was from the other side, which was still going through like the hurt and the processing and making decisions, like whilst like there was hurt, it would impact something that we would have a conversation about. And then a day later I would get an email that would say something else, and I'd just be like, I just want to do this nicely because you were still the person that I loved and I chose to have children with. And my ex-husband is the most important person in my children's lives. So why wouldn't I want to treat him with the respect that they would expect me to? And so it was kind of hard because we both had broken homes, both me and my ex, but we both had different experiences of broken homes. And so his parents had done it really amicably. And so he didn't have the experience of having to live in a negative environment. And so I would have to keep reminding him, like, please, like, don't do this to the kids. It's very easy to go down a path that was never the intention in the first place because you're hurt. And he was very hurt, and it was just a really difficult time all round, wasn't it? And they didn't know the full story. The two of them didn't know the full story. None of us were in a place that we were able to talk about anything at the time. And so there were so many unanswered questions, assumptions, lots of assumptions that were just never the case. And so it was really hard for them. And so we had to keep reminding ourselves to not get swallowed up in the...
Not be reactive to that.
Because we had to understand why they were behaving like that, and that it wasn't normally them. We had to try and keep remembering that they are good people, because they are very good people, and they are the parents of our children. So it was just... It was a very difficult time.
It was like a scale sometimes. It was like a scale sometimes, wasn't it? Like, I don't want to speak too much for them, but in the early days, they were always still, whilst they were together, they would still do things and operate quite separately. Whereas immediately from the word go, we were always kind of like a team, weren't we? We were always a kind of a collective unit. And that's fine, each to their own. But what we sometimes found was there was a bit of a balancing act in all like practical terms, emotional terms, all different ways of dealing with things, where you'd be agreeing something on one side, but then they would all honestly talk about things separately. And then it would come back around differently the other way, wasn't it? So it was always this kind of constant flow of juggling of how to get through it all.
I think there was an element as well at the time that we didn't have any knowledge of how divorce process worked. Like, we had no idea of what the implications of what we had done, like what they would have on your rights as a parent, as an ex-husband, like financially. Like we didn't have any of that knowledge, and it made it really hard because you're constantly trying to protect yourself because you don't want to say anything that may affect you in the future. And are there any implications of having an affair, like legally? So we didn't have that help.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think people do panic. I mean, I went for a walk recently with a friend whose husband had actually committed infidelity, and their relationship is currently in the process of a very early breakdown. And her immediate worry was, am I going to lose the children? You're like, what? Like, where's that come from? But you automatically catastrophize and you go to worst case scenario. And I mean, the reality is that going back a few years within the whole divorce process, you had to give a reason why the marriage was breaking down. So unless you wanted to wait 2 years to do a 2-year separation petition, you had to either say that there was an unreasonable behaviour or there was adultery. And so you had to kind of pin yourself to the mast with one of those factors if you wanted to be able to divorce, within that 2-year period.
Some people used to really want to put the name to it as well, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was something that the family lawyers, there's an association of family lawyers called Resolution, and they petitioned the government that they wanted a change to this because the reality is that the reason behind the marriage breakdown has no impact on child arrangements and it has no impact on financial settlements. And so why are we making people put it all into a divorce petition, and for one person to have to write it all down and then the other person to have to read it, because it's not pleasant to read, 5 or 6 reasons why somebody doesn't want to be in a relationship with you anymore in black and white. And it's embarrassing. They've gone to their lawyer's seen it, it's come to your lawyer's seen it. It's just not a pleasant process. And we were doing that process, and then we're trying to have really reasonable conversations about child arrangements or financial settlements, and it doesn't work, it doesn't help. And so there was a big petition. We've had a change in the law. So for the last few years now, we've had the no-fault divorce, which means that to be able to issue divorce proceedings, you just have to show that the marriage has broken down irretrievably, and you don't have to give any reason. And we also have now joint applications. So you don't even feel like one person has to kind of petition against the other. But it's surprising, coming to your point there, that just as the law was about to change and there'd been loads of publicity about it, the number of clients that I had that instructed saying, no, I need you to issue my divorce petition before that changed because it was their fault and I absolutely want it down in the petition so that everybody knows it was their fault.
The emotional
justice. Even though it makes no difference
to
child arrangements or finances.
Do you think it's because they think that maybe one day their children will see that? Or
Yeah, potentially. And I think sometimes hurt people. So they're really hurt and upset potentially for whatever the breakdown of the relationship is. It doesn't have to be adultery. It could be a multitude of different things. And it's that validation of my marriage has broken down because that person did that to me, rather than it was because there can be a whole host of reasons why a marriage breaks down. Is often like the last straw that kind of breaks the camel's back, but it's not usually that thing isn't always the thing that actually causes the relationship breakdown. Usually there's something that's kind of been simmering under the surface for a while.
A multitude of things, of catalysts, and the affair usually ends up being an outcome.
Yeah. What do you find with your clients? How do they approach relationship breakdown when you're having these conversations with them? Potentially, I suppose, if they're thinking about a relationship breakdown or they're really new to it, what advice are you giving them?
Slow down, get informed.
Yeah.
Right? You do need a team of people around you and in different pockets, legal, right? Our financial understandings as well, and then the emotional and practical side of things, and get informed. One of the things that's always quite difficult for people, even in those very early phases, is about understanding what's the positive influences. We were talking about this on the train on the way down, weren't we? About having those outside influences like our nearest and dearest friends and family that are around us, or whoever it might be. And what was the example that you gave on the train? You were saying about you wouldn't go and take...
It's taking advice from the right
taking
people.
Advice from the right people.
People that have got positive outcomes, that have approach the divorce in a positive way, not taking advice from people who have never been divorced, never been children of divorce, never
or have been but have got a long
really
negative story, bad example that lives
like
with
childbirth.
them.
Yeah. It's like childbirth. If you're pregnant, you need to speak to people that have had really positive birthing experiences, because you can go up to people and they'll be like, yeah, I nearly died. And they
Don't need
did. But when you're in that situation, that's not what you need. You don't need to hear worst case scenario.
When you're 8
You
months
need to hear
pregnant.
like positive, positive
You go
stories,
to an
don't
analogy on the
you?
train. You wouldn't go for racehorse tips from someone that's lost everything down the track. Would you?
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, what I say, people slow down, get informed, thinking things through, not making rash decisions, and planning ahead. And because a lot of people will immediately go, let's say if they've got past that kind of pre-phase of like kind of makeup or breakup, or to coin a friend and peer colleague of mine, Dr. Sue Palmer-Con, she talks to people about like either mend, bend, or end your relationship. So you're looking to mend the existing relationship that was there, and be that if it's marriage counselling or discernment coaching or variants thereof. I mean, we're talking about affairs and adulteries, so typically there's going to be a multitude of reasons why you've got to that stage in the first place, either one of you, that experience. So mending the existing relationship is probably less likely. Is feasible.
I was going to say, is it possible?
It's possible. Yeah, it is possible. It can be done, but it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of honesty. There's going to be a lot of pain to get through for each of you. I think the biggest thing that comes out for the clients that I see, let's say, who are the wayward one, or the one whose head was turned, is they never come to me happy about this. Like, even if they, and it's that conundrum, and I can really, really connect to this because I hated myself. I was falling head over heels in love with someone at the same time as hurting someone who's one of the most important people in my life and the mother of my children and a lovely human being who deserved to be happy and didn't deserve to be hurt. I always said that I would never be that person. Once I was married, kids, that's it. It went against everything I stood for and who I thought I was, and I absolutely hated myself. And my clients come to us with huge, huge waves of guilt. They don't like who they are. It's questioning everything about who they thought they were, who everybody else is going to think they are, who they think their kids are going to think that they are, etc. So, I think going back to your original question, yes, it can be, but I think like if you're looking at recovery from an affair or adultery, recovery doesn't necessarily mean just the repair of that relationship. There's recovery outside of it as well. And I think that's kind of our example really of a recovery, but not staying in the marriage, that actually there's other forms of recovery and it's working through your stuff. Again, you said on the train on the way down, didn't you? We were talking about guilt and you said you never lose that. You never lose guilt. It's always
I never
omnipresent.
will. It just depends. I guess it depends of
The
type
individual.
of person you are. Like I will never not feel guilty about what we did. It's not something that I'll ever be proud of. I mean, it's something that we own, but it's something that I will never be happy about. Some people don't care. Some people do care. I think it just depends on the type of person that you are. But Tom's ex-wife will always know that, like, she's a friend of mine now. I don't know how she ever likes me, but we are friends, and she's one of my best friends, and like I would do anything for her. And I guess maybe in the beginning it was because, you know, I felt like I needed to say sorry somehow, and you know, I love her children, and I wanted her to know that I loved her children, and I want the children to know that I love their mum. It's important for them to see that we get along and that they can come to any of us. That, like, there's things that my children go to Tom's ex for, and there's things that her children come to me for. It's because sometimes it's easier to not talk to a parent. But I think someone said to me once, I don't think I could have someone acting as a mum to my children. And what I can't understand is why someone would prefer that the step parent of their children would be someone that they don't get along with, because that is not a nice environment for your children. So why would you not want them to like the step parent? I want my children to be surrounded by people that love them, and that my children have two mums and two dads, and like they'll always have their real mum and their real dad, but I know that they've also got additional people that love them, and they're so happy. And so I just don't understand why people wouldn't want that for their children. One of my parents had an affair. Actually, I think both of them did. This is when we were kids, but they did get back together. And then we spent 4 years being miserable before they actually divorced.
And is that because they thought that was the better thing to do for you as the children?
They absolutely did. And it was the worst thing they could have done, because the first time that they separated, they actually both went out of their way to improve the people that they were, and they were happier people when they first separated. But then when they got back together, it was very, very different. There was a lot that had happened that was difficult for them to get over, which meant that we were living in a house where you could tell, like, they were trying to, like, they did their best to hide it, as parents do, but children know. They do know. And it wasn't nice. And so I think that I learned that I was never going to do that to my children. But then again, that's life experience, isn't it? If you've been raised in a 2.4 children, like where your parents have stayed together, your grandparents have stayed together, there's just no
model.
There's no model to turn to. So you turn to your friends who might be happily married and that only put themselves in a position of, oh, well, I would do this or I would do that. Well, it's all very well and good if you're on the outside and you can give lots of advice, but would you actually take it if you were in that position? So,
and I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, we can all give advice in the pub or in the coffee house to somebody that's going through something, but we never know how we will react in a situation until we're physically put into it. Everybody will deal with it differently, and there's no point judging ourselves or other people for how they manage that, because you're just doing your best ultimately in what are really challenging situations, and you can only learn from them. I mean, what's amazing and what I love about your story when Tom has told it to us previously is that now, like, you guys and your ex-partners are such an amazing co-parenting unit, and are really good friends, holiday together without the children. I think that came out when we talked last time.
We'll go karting on Saturday.
Yeah. So how did you get from the separation, the turmoil of the early days, to where you are now? What are your key takeaways to what got you there?
The first and foremost is it wasn't always like this.
No, people do think, they think, oh, well, they must have split amicably because they're like that now. That is beyond not true. It was awful at one point. It was really bad. Like,
well,
it was.
I filled up the C100s. I done the CAFCAS interviews. We had some really horrible false allegations made at the 11th hour before a final hearing, but we still managed to come through it all. And I think that's all.
Well, someone has to forgive, because you could go on like that forever, and we would have gone on like that forever if every time someone did something bad, someone retaliated. And it's so easy to get caught up in that, oh, well, they've done this, so I'm going to do that. But then you forget about how the children are getting hurt in the meantime. And it was actually my ex's parents that actually changed my whole perspective of divorce, because they did it so amicably. And when me and my ex first got together, I was just like, it's weird that your parents are in the same room and having dinner together. And I found it really weird. I couldn't quite understand it, but we were together for over a decade. So I was just like, right, that's exactly how I want that for my children. And that's all I kept remembering. And
presence.
Yeah.
Whenever there was a sliver of a window of opportunity to be present, to help, to do anything in any way, shape or form, we would always try and grasp it, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And it just built over time. And the other thing is what you're rebuilding is just a new form of trust. It's different to what it was before. All four of us have all been going through our own kind of emotional roller coasters with different experiences, different feelings. Like I said earlier, being head over the heels ecstatically, like Disney style love, at the same time feeling horrible about hurting somebody else. She was also going through her own stuff as well. I think, it's just kind of once you've all worked through and then started letting go of some of those things, you can regain trust again. I think the other thing was when we started to notice the positive impact it would then have on the kids, because we were noticing like some of the negative impacts that were happening on them when they were still being in one house, somewhat treated not quite as a collective. And there was different rules over when these two kids were that day, and it wasn't, pardon the pun, but the co-parenting show didn't marry up, did it? For want of a better phrase. But then when it did, how that started to shift and how the kids were happier, because that was also causing a bit of friction, wasn't it, in those earlier days, was, well, why do they get to do this thing, or why can't they be here at this house, or vice versa, on those different routines. And it did create this kind of disparity between them, didn't it?
Yeah, because the kids would come back from the other parents and they'd say, we heard this and we heard that, and someone said this about you and someone said that about you. We made a massively conscious effort to make sure that we didn't say like bad things, even in like retaliation, or that there was one incident where you did about the haircut, do you remember? But basically what we found is that they are young children and they are relaying something that someone has said.
It's the whispers, isn't
Potentially
it?
out of context.
And it
as
is
well.
a lot of,
base.
a lot
Yeah.
of it is out of context, and everyone is getting mad at the other one for saying this, that, and the other. And I think one of the kids had come home and said, "You're not allowed to cut my hair," to their dad, and because mummy said you're not allowed to cut my hair. And so he got
Right.
so he it was the first time that he was just like, right, and I was like, right, enough. And he said something to one of the kids. And he said, I think it was something along the lines of, "You're my child. I'll allow you."
I'm your father. I'll take you.
Yeah,
to get your
and
haircut.
I was like, "Can I just have a word?" so we went outside and
Life
and,
CEO.
yeah, and I was like, "Right, now you need to go in there and apologise to them because you shouldn't have said that." And I was like, "But now you need to call her
Yeah.
and apologise to her." And so I think that every time we made mistakes, we owned them, and we would tell the other parents that we made this mistake. This was the context. This is what was said, so that they could start to trust that when we had done something wrong, we would tell
Oops,
them.
alone.
So that if they would hear something from the children, they started to realise, okay, right, so what was the context of this? And in the early stages, when we weren't talking to the other parents, the kids would come home and they say, "We heard this and this was said," and we just constantly reminded them, look, when people separate, that they don't act themselves. It doesn't mean that the dad that you know isn't there. He's still there. And I was like, you just got to give him some time. Because when they hear things, it's upsetting for them. If it doesn't matter whether or not mummy did something wrong or daddy did something wrong, they don't want to hear that person's a bad person, and so they tell you, and it's sad for them, and like they get quite upset. So it's, instead of retaliating, it was just, look, it's going to be fine. I'm not upset about it, so don't you be upset about it. They don't mean it. I mean, I knew how much my ex still cared about me. We still had like a mutual respect for each other because he never ever said that I was a bad parent. It was just a bad situation that we just had to keep reminding ourselves, but someone needs to keep doing something different. And it took years. It wasn't a try it once and keep being positive once and then everything gets forgotten. It didn't work like that. It was like 2-3 years. Well, it was longer than 2 years actually. I think it was almost 3. It was almost 3 years before I got divorced. So it was just constant. But a lot of people give up before then. So which is why it goes on forever, and then there's never forgiveness, and someone has to forgive and keep forgiving regardless.
Not just once.
Not just once. And it's exhausting. It is really exhausting. If
But it is
anyone
worth
was, it's so worth it. Like, if you saw how happy our children are, I mean, my daughter's 20 now. She has a great relationship with her dad, which she probably didn't have as good a relationship with him before when we were together. But like after the separation, they got closer, and it actually enforced their relationship. Our children have great relationships with all 4 parents, which we're just really happy about, and no one else matters. If I'm honest, I don't care about anybody else's opinion. And like, everyone says, "Oh, that's weird." I don't care because my children are happy.
I think it's inspirational to have managed to go through all of that turmoil and come out in such a positive place. Is a real testament to how all 4 of you have worked individually, like within your couples, with your ex-partners, on a whole host of things to enable that to happen. And I guess that's probably quite a nice place to wrap up. We like to end the podcast with some top tips. Okay. So what would your top tip be, or your biggest reflection, however you want to do it, for somebody that is just starting out on this road? So perhaps there has been an affair and they're processing this, or whether they are the person that's committed to the affair or the other person, what would you be saying to them?
Don't forget who you fell in love with. They're still there. Like, they're who you chose to have children with. And remember that person that you're angry with at the moment is still the other most important person in your children's lives. They're the only people that you should be speaking about with your children to. And just remember how much you love your children, and take your time. Take your time. Don't make rash decisions in the early stages when you're angry. Don't change your name unless you are sure that you want to. It's
Conversation go up on Saturday.
Yeah. Just take your time and just try and remember who you fell in love with.
I think if you're the person that's had the affair, understand why. Ultimately, it's about unmet needs, in whether that's emotional, physical, whatever it might be. Understand not the narrative that you've maybe told yourself, but understand the reasons behind it for you. But then also go and do the work as well and understand your guilt, understand it's going to be there for a long time, if not probably forever. Lessen, but it'll be omnipresent. Process your emotions, as well as if you are the person that's on the recipient end of this, that's got the shock, that's got the fears, that is in deep pain. We have a saying that no one wakes up on a Tuesday morning and goes, right, that one, I'm leaving for them. There has been a systematic build-up that we were talking about earlier. To equally going through the next stages from the legal side, from the financial side to the emotional and practical side. Again, just go through the motions, take your time, don't rush these.
And honestly, thank you so much for coming. It's been a really interesting conversation.